Monday night, Rosh Hashanah. Monday night, the beginning of a new month, Tishrei. And yet, we did not recite moments ago the prayer that we recite every Shabbat before a new month. Mevarchim HaChodesh, the blessings for a new month. It's a custom. Many of our prayers are customs, meaning that they evolved over times by the rabbi's guiding community. And the rabbi said, the month before the new year, the Shabbat before Tishrei, we don't say the blessing. Instead, God chants on our behalf. We don't know exactly what God's prayer is, but the rabbis do some remarkable things in terms of imagining God's prayers, of imagining God in human-like ways. Someone said, a pundit, that the Bible teaches that God created us in the image of God, and we returned the favor. And so the rabbis in the brachot, in the Talmudic discussions of how to pray, will have a discussion in 6a as to God's tefillin, the phylacteries, the leather bands. Human tefillin are worn as a symbol of connection to God, kind of like a wedding ring, a symbol of covenant. And in our phylacteries, in our leather boxes worn on our forehead and in our arm, a commandment that's part of our Shema prayers, are blessings that describe our responsibilities to God. Ol Malchut Shemayim, the yoke that we wear, acknowledging the sovereignty of God. And so the rabbis in Masechet Brachot 6a espouse the fact that God too wears tefillin, and we'll ask from how do we know that God wears tefillin? Rabbi Avin bar Rav Ada said in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, and then verses are cited, for it says, Ubimino uvizroa kodsho. God has sworn by his right hand, by the arm of his strength. And they will then say that the right hand, that's reference to Torah, which leads to the question of God wears tefillin. What do God's tefillin say? And the discussion continues with Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak asking Rabbi Chia bar Avin to Hane tefillin demare alma makativ behu. These tefillin of the Master of the universe, what is written in them? To which Rabbi Chia bar Avin answers, Amar le, he says to him, Umi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. And who is like your people Israel, one nation in the land? And so what do God's tefillin have written in them? Praise of the people of Israel. Now there will be further discussion because the tefillin that we have actually have 4 different parchments, and that's only one statement. And then there will be a back and forth. There will be another 5 verses suggested, and they'll say, well, that equals 6. And then they'll point out that some of these verses are similar. But what all the verses have in common is that God's tefillin, as imagined by the rabbis, contain love of the people of Israel, which are mirroring what we have in our tefillin, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, and you shall love the Lord your God. Well, that's an example of many examples of a remarkable anthropomorphism, a remarkable giving over human-like qualities to God. Not just praying, but wearing tefillin. And one other, because it's one of my favorite dramatic examples of this kind of seeing God in human-like ways, is a description of the aftermath of the golden calf. This too is in Brachot in the Talmud, page 32a. God says to Moses as follows in Exodus 32:10, Va'ata, and now, Hanichali, leave me alone, V'yichar api vahem, that my nostrils will rage against them, Va'achelem, and I will consume them, Va'aseh otcha l'goy gadol, and I will make you, Moses, into a great nation. And Moses in the Torah talks God down from that extreme wrath. And Rabbi Abahu says, Ilmale mikra katuv iv sharlom ro, if this was not written down, namely Moses' response in this whole story of God's wrath and being placated, he says, if it wasn't written, it would be impossible for me to say. Milamed shetavso Moshe LaKodesh Baruch Hu, it teaches that Moses grabbed the Holy One, blessed be He, ka'adam shu tofes et chavero bivigdo, as a human, an earthling, who grabs his friend's garment, va'amar lefanav, and says to him, Ein ani manicha, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the universe, Ein ani manicha, I will not release you, ad shetim chol v'tislach lahem, until you forgive and pardon them. I love this image, and they do use the word here. Actually, it doesn't say ki'ilu. This is an example where it doesn't say as if. It says shetafsu. It teaches that Moses grabbed God by his clothing, by his collar, shook him, get a grip. Dramatic description of how the rabbis see God in human-like terms. You may know that in the Hasidic tradition, God is called Tata, Father. So when one prays to God in the Hasidic oral tradition, one refers to God as my father, my parent, to create a sense of intimacy. That too, calling God Avinu, Malkeinu, our Father, our King, is anthropomorphism. First of all, to call God parent or king is to describe God in human-like terms, which is only natural. And where this is all going, this introduction, is to underscore that come Monday night and Tuesday and Wednesday, as we sit to mark and celebrate a new year, we will be holding a machzor in our hands. Literally, the word machzor means to repeat. It is a cycle, a repetition of words that connect us with the start of a new year and connect us to our Creator. But the words of our machzor, not unlike the words of our prayer this morning, are projections. They say more about us than necessarily about God. For what can ultimately be said about God? As Maimonides taught, you can only describe God by saying what God is not, because God is not human. God is not physical. God is not like us. God is other with a capital O, the source of creation, the source of unity, the source of love that flows through us. And we need We need God. We need a focal point to express our gratitude. We need a focal point to express our fears. We need a focal point to pull together a unity so as to be able to see in each other a reflection of that unity. But how do we speak about God? How do we speak about a presence that we may experience in holy moments, but cannot describe literally? We do it with metaphors. And so we say of God, God, you are like my mother and father. You gave me life. You, God, are like my mother and my father, my primal educators. No matter how I may want to get away from it, those early words are imprinted in me. I hear the echoes of my parents' words. I may sometimes react against them, but they're present and embedded within me. You, God, are intimate. You, God, are ever present. I can turn toward you when I need comforting, when I need a presence. You are my parent. And yet, I acknowledge your power. I acknowledge your mystery. I acknowledge how much is out of my control. And in that light, you are like a sovereign. You have the power. You have the control that ultimately could dictate if you didn't let go to give me free will. You are Avinu Malkeinu, a description of myself, one who is childlike, vulnerable, aware of needing comfort, and one who acknowledges my opportunity to choose, to be responsible, to think in terms of obeying commands that weren't my commands, but given over by a greater power. And so, as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah, we are reminded that to speak to God is to pray. Prayer expresses our deepest yearnings, unfiltered, because God knows us, accepts us, and loves us as a parent and as a sovereign, has expectations of our obedience, that we will rise to live up to God's expectations. But the rabbis point out that when we say that God is king, God is the opposite of a human king. Human kings, and this is written by those rabbis who lived in the time of kings, tend to only spend time with other powerful people. Simple people did not have access to the sovereign. In contrast, when we chant Avinu Malkeinu, we are saying that our sovereign is one who accepts each of us as valuable, as worthy of being heard. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, as we chant Avinu Malkeinu, we will sing, for we are reminded that even beyond words, it is melodies that open our hearts, and yet it is with words that we express ourselves with more awareness of what is on our hearts. May we use the coming days to become more self-aware, more aware of your intimacy and of your distance, of your presence and your mystery, and may that allow us to be more whole. Amen.